All right, folks, here's another edition of the Bobby Bowen Show, a brand new show on Facebook, and this is episode number 7, and this is God's perfect number right here. And look who I chose to be on the show today. It's my old, I'll say old, we're the same age, but we sang together for about 12 years with Midsouth Boys / Midsouth, and it's Robby McGee. Everybody say hi to Robby out there in Facebook land. It's Robby right there. How you doing, Robby?
I'm doing awesome, and I am excited that I get to be number 7. Immediately when you said number 7, I'm like, that's God's perfect number.
Yeah,
you said it. So
that's right, man. Robby, I've known you for, let's see, since 1981, I think, when you first joined the Midsouth Boys. That's when I first met you. And you were with the group about a year before I was when I joined,
right.
But you had a big part in me being hired with the group, because I told my story, and I told how I went to Ashdown, Arkansas, to hear you guys sing, because y'all had a major change in the group, because Larry Rudkins had died of cancer, and then two of the group members left right after he died, and y'all hired Steve Knight to sing baritone, and you were singing tenor, and Tommy was singing more leads and baritones, and then Steve was singing leads and baritones. Your brother Stacy was singing bass. So I went there just to see what you guys sounded like, not even thinking that I was going to go for a job or anything. I just wanted to hear you. And at intermission, you and Stacy, your brother, talked to me during the break and asked me to go to Dallas with you for the rest of the weekend. So I just kind of took off from there. So you had a big part in where I am today, man, and I appreciate that so much.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember that. And we actually went to a place in Dallas called The Barn.
Seagoville.
It was, and it was a guy named the Halyards, Dale Halyard.
Dale Halyard, yeah.
He had a family that sang, and that's actually who Stacy first sang with. Was the Halyard family. Yeah. So yeah, it was cool. We got to go to the barn down there, and things just took off from there.
Yeah, and I told everybody that I sang one song with you. Y'all got me up to sing Beulah Land or something like that. And then the rest of the time I sat back there on the drums and played drums with you, which I'm not a drummer, but I was keeping the beat. So, but then the next weekend, y'all wanted me to go to Houston or Cleveland, Texas with you for New Year's Eve, and that's when I got hired. So that was December of '82. So it's been a while.
And you kind of got in. You kind of snuck in because Tommy really wanted a tenor singer.
Yeah. When he
called, had to sing tenor on a few songs.
I think he called me that next week and wanted me to go to Cleveland with y'all. And he said, here's 3 songs I want you to learn and play bass on. I want you to sing the tenor part. And I thought, tenor? I'm not a tenor singer, but man, I wanted it so bad. I did it. It wasn't that high, but still, Tommy didn't sing up in the rafters like a lot of tenor singers and quartets do. So it wasn't that hard to do. So, but it landed me the job. So I was there for 15 years, as you know, man. So wouldn't trade a minute of it. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you, man. And I want to go back, just like I have everybody else, go back to the beginning. Like you can tell everybody where you were born, what year, if you want to. And Robby's about, about a month and a half older than me, something like that?
Yes, right at a month and a half. I'm on the 6th of September, so you're in October.
28th of October, so about a month, almost 2 months. So let's go back to where you were born, and just kind of go from there and tell us how old you were when you thought, I want to be a musician or a singer. What influences did you have early on? Just start from there.
Okay. So I was born on September the 6th, 1963 in Dallas, Texas at Baylor Medical Center. So that was where it all started for me. And I lived in Dallas up until I was 18 years old. So as far as music goes, I wasn't really interested that much in music initially, although we were a fairly musical family. My dad loved to sing. He loved to play the piano. He loved quartet music. He loved gospel music. So he played the piano by ear. So he would sit around the piano and he would make us kids sing with him. And he liked John Denver. He loved the Oak Ridge Boys. I could go on and on about the different people that Dad really loved. And I was the youngest, so I had to learn how to sing tenor because I was the youngest and I had the highest voice. And I remember sitting around the piano, and I didn't really know about any of the parts except for tenor. For whatever reason, that's the part he taught me, and that's the part I heard. I learned tenor before I even learned what lead was. I mean, I'm serious. It was.
So you could sing. You could sing a part before you could sing the melody, the lead.
I could. Yeah.
That's different than most people. Yeah.
I know, but that was the way that I learned it, and that's what I heard. Every song I heard on the radio, or if my dad played a record or whatever it was, every song that I heard, I would hear the melody being sang when it was by itself, but immediately when any kind of harmony came in, I really heard the tenor. I gravitated towards that. So that was all well and good, I thought I would grow out of that, but I never did. I ended up singing tenor for everything that I ever did. But when I loved sports, loved football, so I was really caught up in sports until I was around 6 years old. And when I was 6 years old, my sister started taking piano lessons, and I started listening to her play the piano. And my dad had always played the piano, and I'm like, I think I could play the piano. So I asked my mom, I said, can I take piano lessons? And Mom's like, sure. So she said, but she goes, you need to understand that if you start taking piano lessons, then you can't quit. You can't just say, I want to do it. And a month later you're going to quit. So I didn't necessarily know that Mom meant that I had to take piano lessons till I was a teenager at that point. But it's funny because I remember taking the lessons, and I remember beginning to learn, and I would learn theory and different things like that. And I did. I think Mom did not want me to stop because she felt like there was some talent. She let my sister quit. I always tell my sister, I'm like, she realized you didn't have any talent. She made me keep playing.
There's no hope. Quit while you're ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I remember just continuing to play, but I would I got tired of actually playing, not necessarily because I didn't enjoy playing the piano, but because of the style of music that I was playing. And, some of it was classical music, which I had an appreciation for, but didn't really enjoy playing. And so it was show tunes. I remember Mac the Knife, was one of the songs. And then they got into Scott Joplin, those types of what do they call it? Ragtime songs.
Yeah.
And I just really didn't enjoy that. And I remember I told my mom, I was probably around 12 or 13 years old. And I said, I really don't want to take piano lessons anymore. And she says, she goes, I've got a songbook for you. And, she knew that I'd been getting a little bit tired of playing the music that I was playing. So the songbook she bought me was the Eagles' greatest hits.
Oh.
And yes.
How about
so that? I opened it up, and the first song that I went to was Desperado.
Oh,
and
man, yeah.
So
Piano
I sat
song.
down. Yes.
Intro,
so, yeah. So I sat down and I started playing Desperado, and it was like, because I had heard it so much on the radio, it just really came natural to me by looking at the music, and I played by music, but I loved that. It had Peaceful Easy Feeling on there.
Yeah.
So I just really Take It Easy. I mean, It was just really cool. All the stuff that I was hearing on the radio that I absolutely loved. I was an Eagles fan. I began to play that music, but I remember putting the music book aside and beginning to say, because it never really dawned on me that I could listen to music and play it without reading music, right?
Yeah.
Because I had never done it before. but it came so natural to me to be able to do that. I started just playing songs that I heard on the radio, and and that began to be natural to me. It was so natural for me to just hear something and sit down and begin to play it. And so I began to play all of my favorite songs. So that was really probably around 12 or 13 years old was when I really began to enjoy playing the piano at a level that I'd never enjoyed it before. So that was kind of a turning point for me.
So your brother Stacy was our bass singer with Midsouth Boys when I joined the group for a couple of years. Then he left, but he was singing for he sang for a couple of groups, didn't he, down around the Dallas area before he joined Midsouth Boys, or was it just the Halyards?
No, he sang for another family group called the Ellis Family, and so he sang as he was a bass singer for them. They were a quartet. They were a mixed quartet. And then after he sang for the Ellis Family for a while, then the Halyards asked him to come sing for them. And the Halyards actually had, I believe it was either the Halyards or the Ellis Family actually brought Midsouth Boys to Texas for a concert. That was where they heard Stacy.
Okay.
So they ended up hiring Stacy probably within a month after they heard him the first time. Yeah. Okay. So he left and went on the road. He was probably 18 at the time, which meant I was 16.
Yeah.
So after he went on the road, we would go listen to them and other groups sing from time to time. And I'd already been exposed to music. It's funny. I was listening to your interview and I heard you talk about your mom and dad coming to the quartet convention when it was in Dallas. Yeah. So my mom and dad and they took me to that as well.
Oh, wow. Really?
And the two projects that I remember coming away with, one of them was the Kingsmen and the other one was the Hensons. Yeah, so I fell in love with the Hensons, at that point, because it's just I gravitated to that country style of music. So I began to play some different songs that I heard them singing on the different albums and projects. And when I would hear the Midsouth Boys, I would play their songs. Yeah. So I started playing Midsouth Boys songs just because I would go hear Stacy. So when I turned 18, so I turned 18 in, I guess it would have been September of 81. So when I turned 18 years old in September, I had actually graduated from high school in December of that year. I graduated early. I basically got tired of going to school. I had enough credits. So I asked them if I could graduate early, and they said yes, because I wanted to go to work. I wanted to go to a trade school and learn computer technology. And it was right at that time when I graduated, the next call that I got the next week was from Tommy Alexander saying that Larry had broke his arm. Yeah. And he had a seizure and cracked his arm socket. And so they asked me if I could come play. And so I went and played the piano for them. And the funny thing about that is on that Thanksgiving. So the week before they called me to come play, I'd been playing football and I broke my jaw. And I broke my jaw the night before Thanksgiving. And I went to the emergency room and the doctor looked at me and said, you've broken your jaw in two places. And he said, I'm going to wire it shut. He goes, I'll wire it shut tomorrow because that's the last food you're going to eat for about 6 to 8 weeks. So I had Thanksgiving meal. And after that Thanksgiving meal, I went and had my mouth wired shut. And a week later, I was on the road with the Midsouth Boys. And my mom had sent a bunch of food with me that was, she would puree it in the blender.
And drink it through a straw?
Mm-hmm.
Man.
Yeah. So I did that for 6 weeks. So the whole time that I was on the road that December, I was only on the road with them for about 2 weeks at that time, and because they took off for Christmas. Yeah. But after Christmas, when we went back in January, they're like, look, Larry's found out that he had cancer and we don't know exactly what's going to happen here. So they asked me to stay on and see what happened. So Larry would come back and play from time to time. He began to take chemo treatments and stuff like that. But he was too weak to be on the road full time.
Yeah.
So they ended up hiring me to play the keyboard, piano full time.
And you kind of started singing too at that time when he wouldn't go.
I did. So Tommy would end up having to sing a lot of the lead parts or baritone parts,
Yeah.
you know, because Larry wasn't there. So I began. It's funny because I've listened to some of the different stories about people and how they got on the road and how they started when they were kids and they loved music and they loved groups and they loved all these different things. I'll be honest with you, that really wasn't me. I had no aspirations of going on the road. And I didn't even know that was an option until my brother went on the road full time. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wow, they actually go on the road full time and they pay people to do this. So my motivation was I started traveling and watching my brother. And I noticed that it didn't matter what you look like. The girls gravitated towards musicians and singers and they got paid for doing it. And I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah.
that sounds good for me. I'm 18 years old. I get to meet girls and they're going to pay me to play music. I'm all in. So it wasn't really spiritual. Wasn't really spiritual for me at that point, but I got all that corrected a little bit later.
Yeah, you're kind of different. Most people, like you said, they grow up, you know, as a kid with their family singing like I did, and eventually, joined a group. We sing part-time locally or whatever, and then you get discovered by somebody coming through town, and if they need somebody, they'll call you and ask you to come join them. But you never played with anybody else.
No, that was the first and only group I ever played for.
That's pretty amazing there, because most people, they go through so many till they finally get there, and then they skip around with other groups, you know, along the way. But so Larry had gotten cancer. That was the end of 81 when that happened, toward the end of 81.
Yeah.
So he passed away in October of 82, something like that, or November?
Yeah, it was towards the end of 1982. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was definitely towards the end of 82. And that was one of the things we were holding off on, you know, is we had made the decision that as long as Larry could intermittently go on the road, that we weren't going to try to find somebody to take his place. So as soon as Larry passed away, it was something that we had been thinking about. And as you said, we had actually met you prior to that.
Yeah.
And I'd heard you sing. And so, you know, is immediately when we were talking about needing someone, of course, I loved country and your voice was definitely more country. And so as soon as I got the opportunity to sneak some country into the Southern, I took that opportunity, and that was you.
Yeah, that's right. So after I joined the group, and Stacy was there about a couple of years, and he left, and we tried out some bass singers. Just nobody just really just blew our socks off. I think we got one guy that sent us a cassette of him singing and a picture of himself with a cat, and we knew right away that we didn't want him. So
probably wasn't going to work.
No. So, and about that time, you know, that's when Alabama was really hot, and Restless Heart was coming on the scene, and you started writing songs that were more that style. And so while looking for a bass singer, you and I and Steve Knight for a while sang, and then he left. And then we hired Tony Turner. And so we just decided, let's just stay a trio, because it just seemed to sound, you know, that country style sounded good as a trio, like Alabama. And so it just kind of stayed that way.
Yeah. Well, of course, you know, I said earlier that I absolutely loved the sound of the Eagles, and I loved Alabama. Like Alabama was like one of that, actually the first the first concert I ever went to was an Alabama concert back when they first put out Old Flame.
Oh yeah.
And so I absolutely loved them, but I loved their harmony was what I loved more than anything. Stylistically, I loved their music, but I really, really loved their harmonies and the way that they sang together. So, when Steve left, Steve had more of a Southern gospel voice. So when Steve left, it was you and I, right? So we began to look for somebody who would be able to sing the baritone part. And as you said earlier, we hired Tony Turner. And Tony had a little bit of a unique voice. It wasn't necessarily Southern gospel. It wasn't necessarily country. It wasn't necessarily bluegrass. It was kind of a blend of all of those, probably more bluegrass.
Well, him being from Kentucky
and
having that real Kentucky drawl to his voice, it just kind of, it worked.
Yeah. So yeah, at that time it's like, let's do this, but let's start singing something that has more of a country feel to it, not just with music, but with the harmonies and even the lyrics, maybe a little bit different than what people were used to. So, and my hats go off to Tommy Alexander. Tommy was a songwriter.
Yep.
And I remember thinking I would like to try to write a song when he was there. And I wrote a song, and it was called He Will Lead You Out. And they put it on the Keep On Walking album.
Yep.
And it wasn't a great song. It was probably at best, an average song. But I remember Tommy, when I first showed him the song, he was so gracious. He didn't look at me and say, you probably shouldn't write. He looked at me and said, hey, why don't I give you a few pointers on the song and a few tips, and you see what you can do. So he gave me some pointers, some tips. I went back and rewrote some different things on the song. And it probably didn't belong on an album, but he made the decision to put it on there. So
well, my song probably didn't either belong on there that I wrote, but we put it on there anyway.
So
that was the first song that I had written. That was the first song that I had written, and it went on that first record I was on with Midsouth Boys back in '83. So
yeah. So I guess we both have our hats off to Tommy for being willing to step out there for us and believe in us, and so that was a really cool time for me. But
he didn't say anything about my song that I needed some pointers. So I don't, maybe I missed my
your
call.
Your song was better than mine.
I don't know about that. I mean, it was definitely more country sounding than yours.
Truth. Very true. So I had tried to write the song, but one thing I realized is that I had tried to write the song to fit the quartet, Midsouth Boys. And I realized that just wasn't natural for me. So that was my opportunity to say, you know what? And we all agreed, why don't we try this country sound? Well, there wasn't a lot of country gospel music that was available, that people were writing, that people were sharing. Christian country wasn't even really a thing at that time. So yeah, that gave me the opportunity to start writing songs. And man, when I started writing, it just started becoming natural to me. And the more that I wrote, the easier the songs began to come. So that was really what started my writing. Started out of necessity because we needed some music to sing.
And like you say, there was, with the exception of, Mike Payne and Ronnie Henson, they were about the only ones that were really writing that's, more of a country gospel style back then. So,
and all the good stuff they wrote, they were taking and
they were recording
themselves.
all the good stuff, except for one that Ronnie always came up to me and said we needed to record, but we never did. And, he would sing the same song to me every time.
I know,
but
we all heard it.
Yeah.
Multiple times. Ronnie sang it to each member of the group.
he's really pushing that one. I don't know if everybody ever recorded it or not, but he was really pushing it hard.
Yes,
but your first charting song that you ever wrote was Guilty of Loving Me.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, I think that was the first song I wrote. I think that was the very first song I wrote.
You even wrote that before He Would Lead You Out?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
yeah, with that.
I didn't.
You mean with
I'm
the
not counting He Will Lead You Out. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first. So it was the second song.
Yeah.
that I had ever written. And a funny story about that. So we were on the Harvest label, I think,
Eddie
at
Crook,
that point with Eddie Crook. And Eddie asked me if I had a publisher. I had no idea what a publisher was. I had no idea what a performing licensing organization was, BMI, CSAC, ASCAP. I didn't have any idea what any of it was. I just knew we needed songs.
Yeah.
And so I said no. And he said, well, fill out this paperwork. So I filled out paperwork for BMI and filled out paperwork for Chestnut Mound Music. So that was my first publisher, was Chestnut Mound Music. And I remember hearing my song on the radio, which was very cool to me. The cooler thing was, about a year after I heard my song on the radio, I got a check in the mail.
Yeah.
I had no earthly idea that they paid you to play your music on the radio.
So then you got you a pen and paper and started writing all kinds of songs then, didn't you?
I did. I'm like, this is not a bad deal at all.
Yeah.
And after and I also realized, I didn't know that the publisher got half of whatever half of the money you get, the publisher gets as well. So I went out and started Robby McGee Music.
And the guy singing the song gets nothing.
This is true. Whatever he makes on the road is what he gets.
That's it, man. That's it.
So yeah, I went out and started Robby McGee Music at that point, and so started sharing some of those publisher royalties as well. So
name a few of your songs that were like chart songs. It don't have to be Midsouth Boys. It could be, anybody that's recorded your songs. Name a few of them.
The Cathedrals recorded one called If Seeing Is Believing. Jeff and Sherry Easter recorded a few of my songs. One of them was called Staying Together. It was a song about being married and staying together. White River recorded a couple of my songs. Yep. And I forgot they had recorded. People, we were with White River several months ago, and they were saying, you wrote that song. I didn't write that song. And they're like, yeah, you wrote that song. And I started looking, and I'm like, wait, I wrote 3 of those songs.
You don't even remember what you wrote.
If we didn't do it, some of the times I just don't remember what it was, because I was co-writing with
you co-wrote with a lot of people. Yeah.
So White River was definitely one of the groups, and there have been a lot of groups who have recorded my songs because they heard Mid-South sing them. So those are some of the groups that recorded them. Of course, we had Guilty of Loving Me was the first one. Oh, the Kings Boys recorded one of them. What was that song that the Kings Boys did? It was off of our Boys Will Be Boys project.
Man, I don't remember.
Yep, they sure did. I'm going to have to remember what that was. So anyway, the Kings Boys recorded one of them. Enter In.
Okay, yeah, that was a good song.
Yeah. So anyway, from there, of course, City Lights, was a song that ended up doing well for us as well. One of my songs that probably got more, it definitely got more radio play than any of the songs that I had written, was Sin Met Grace.
Yeah.
Was a song that I say that was probably until Without You. Without You got a lot of radio play.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
As well. So yeah.
Yeah. Sin Met Grace. I still get people asking me all the time if I can sing it.
Yeah.
And
on our projects, I probably typically I would write about half of the songs that were on any given Mid-South project. So it's funny because I still, so that would have been what, 30. So in 82 was when I started, really around 85 was when I started getting my songs on the radio. So 85, 95.
35 years ago, something like that.
Yeah. So I still get royalties from the first song I ever wrote.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's
all the songs that I've ever written.
I've had about two. I think I've had about 3 songs that we've recorded, and one of them was recorded by another group, To Go to Heaven.
Okay,
and it was a top 20 song for them, but I think I only made like $10. So I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to the rest of it.
I actually, it's funny because early on, I began to make more money riding than I was making by being on the road
Yeah.
with Mid-South because of the songs that were being played on
Yeah.
the radio.
Yeah. It's
So
pretty incredible. Speaking of being with Mid-South, you a lot of stuff happened. You know, funny stories and things happen on the road to everybody. But there was a couple of scary moments that happened to you, probably back in '87 or '88, I think, something like that.
yeah,
Probably '87.
yeah, it
We
would have
had
been '87.
our bus engine had blown, and we were borrowing a bus from the Martins. They had just got a little, I don't know what it was. It was ugly. I know that.
I think it was a GMC or a
Something
Buffalo
like
or
that.
something
It
like
didn't
that.
have anything in it. It was just all the seats were out of it. And I remember it had a hammock in there and some mattresses on the floor. And we were going through, I think it was Georgia, and you were driving, and
Mm-hmm.
we were all asleep laying in the back, you know. And all of a sudden we heard sirens going. And this cop was telling you to pull over because it was a 2-lane road. There wasn't no shoulder. And you're like, where, you know? And he pulled his gun out and said, get over. And then he darts in front of us.
And I had
And
to
you
slam
had to
on the
slam
brakes
on
of
the
the bus.
brakes. And he jumps out. All right, everybody out of that bus, you know. So you kind of tell what happened.
Well, he
there.
was so angry because I had headphones on. I don't know how long. He said he'd been following me for a few miles
So you
with
couldn't
his
hear
lights
him.
on, trying to pull me over.
Yeah.
And I wasn't looking in my rearview mirror, and I was listening to music, so I couldn't hear his siren going.
So he was already
So by
worked
the
up.
time he pulled up beside me, he was mad.
Yeah.
I mean, he was mad. And so he is in front of the bus, and he's like, get out of the bus. And he's got, this point, he's got his hand on his gun.
Yeah.
And so I got out of the bus, and he goes, get up against the bus. And so I jump up against the bus, and here I am, you know, spread eagle up against the bus. And he's like, is there anybody else on that bus? And I'm like, yeah, there's people in the back, you know, sleeping. So he goes, well, he told the other guy that was with me, he goes, get him off the bus. So they began to get all of you guys off of the bus, the other 4 of you off the bus. And, you know, I think it was either Joe or you thought it was kind of funny, or I don't know if it was Donnie. One of y'all thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah.
I think me and Joe was the last ones off. Yeah. And y'all were, what was funny was he had everybody with their hands up against the bus, you know, all spread eagle, like you said. And when I came around the corner and saw everybody, I thought, this has got to be a joke. And I'm kind of sniggering. He's like, this ain't no laughing matter, son. Get your hands up against the bus. So,
yeah. So I'm like, what did we, I'm like, what's the problem? What did we do? And he goes, well, you stole fuel back in, you know, this town, wherever it was. And I'm like, I didn't steal any fuel. And he goes, yeah. He goes, and you're going to have to go back and answer for it.
We're going to have to back up a little bit because the bus that we were borrowing from the Martins had a water leak.
Yeah.
And we would have to stop about every, 2 or 3 hours and fill up the radiator.
Yeah, to make sure that there was water in the bus.
You stopped at that fuel station to fill up the radiator.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I'd done. I'd fill up the radiator and I'd left. So I looked at the police officer and I said, okay. I said, let's go back, because that's what he said. He said, you're going to have to go back there and you're going to have to, you know, straighten all this out. And I said, okay. I said, but I didn't steal the fuel. And so we turned around. We got an official police escort back.
I mean, it was the whole county volunteer police department. I mean,
we were
there
dangerous.
Was guys in 4-wheel drives with shotguns on us and everything. It was quite a scene.
Yeah, it was an ordeal. So I remember pulling back up to the gas station, and I told him, I said, so would you ask him if this is where I was parked? And so they went and had gotten the manager or whoever said I'd stolen the fuel. They got him out of the store, and he came out there, and I said, is this where I was parked? And he said, yes, that's exactly where you were parked, and you stole, I don't remember, it was over $100 worth of fuel.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, look, I said, I didn't steal your fuel, but if you can make the fuel from the hose, if you can make that fit to the fuel tank, I'll pay for whoever stole your gas. And he says, well, where you put the fuel in? He didn't know where to put the fuel in. So I showed him where to put the fuel in, and there was no way, because we had pulled up so far from the tank. The fuel tank was like towards the front, and the water was in the back. So there was obviously no way that they could make it. So they apologized, and we got to leave on our own recognizance.
Yeah, and then we were back in that bus again the next weekend. I forgot exactly where we were. Was it Texas?
We were in Texas.
And that next weekend, another incident happened to you. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I didn't have a lot of luck in that particular bus. So we were had a it was a hose. So we had a hose go out on the bus, and it had another leak. So I was going to fix it myself. So we pulled up to this store that I thought would have a hose, but it was closed. And so I was standing by the front door, and this guy pulled up and said, hey, he goes, is the store open? I said, it's not open. I said, it doesn't open till like 8:00. So he said, okay, thank you. So he left. So I went back on the bus. Well, when 8:00 came, I went to the store, and I walked inside the store, and I said, hey, I need to see if y'all have a water hose. He goes, yeah, we have some hoses. They're in the back. So I went to the back of the store, and I was looking for hoses, and I picked one up that I thought would work. And I turned around, and when I turned around, I saw that the store was being robbed. And there was a guy that had a gun, and I was standing in one of the aisles, and he turned around and saw me. And when he saw me, he said, get out on the ground now. So I fell down to the ground, and he came up, and he put the gun straight to the back of my head. And he goes, give me all your money. And I'm like, it's in my billfold. And I had about $50 in my billfold because I'd been saving up to get me some new Nike tennis shoes. So he took my Nike tennis shoe money.
Oh, man.
And so he said, now stay on the ground. He goes, if y'all get up from the ground, he goes, I'm going to shoot you. So I'm assuming he left. There wasn't nothing chimed. There wasn't a bell on the door to really know if he had left or not. So all of a sudden I hear someone say, check and see if he's left. And I'm like, I'm not checking. And it was the attendant behind the cash register. I'm like, you check. And he said, I can't check. He said, he's tied me up in chains.
Oh, man.
So I went and helped him get loosed from his chains. And ended up stealing my Nike tennis shoe money. So I had to start all over, but at least he didn't pull the trigger. So that was weird. That is the weirdest feeling, strangest feeling I've ever had in my life, was laying on the ground with that pistol pointed right at the back of my head.
Yeah. And we were all asleep on the bus, so we had no idea what was going on till you came out there. And I think you were checking on us to make sure he didn't come and try to rob us. And I remember you walking on the bus saying, hey, guys. And we all went, what? Nothing, go back to sleep. So we didn't know what happened till we got up and you told us about it.
Yeah, we had several $100s of I'm sure at that time worth of cassette and album money that we had been selling as we had been traveling on the road. So my concern is that he came out there and robbed you guys as well. So I was glad that didn't happen. So God looked out for us.
He did, and we were so glad to get rid of that bus, weren't we?
Yeah, we appreciated what they did for us. But,
we appreciated it. But man, it brought us bad luck for some reason. I don't know. But it wasn't long after that it was, I think it was September of '88 that you and we were having a little time off the road, and you and your wife, Vanessa, decided to go to Panama City Beach, Florida on a little vacation and go scuba diving with a couple friends of yours. So talk about that.
So we had, we finished up, but we were at the DeQuoin, Illinois State Fair. I don't know if you remember being there or not.
I do.
You remember who we were with?
I think it was Willie Nelson, wasn't it?
It was Willie Nelson. Yeah, we were on the same show with Willie Nelson. That was the was the last show that we did, and we had about I think we had a couple of weeks off,
Yeah.
just to take some vacation time. So we went to Panama City Beach, Florida, and I'd been scuba diving since I was probably around 12 years old. I'd gotten my scuba certification, and my dad and I went scuba diving and dove together. That's something that we really enjoyed. So there were some friends of ours, and they were he was a diver as well. So we had gone down there for he and I go scuba diving. So a day after we were there, we went diving out on the dive boat, and I had what they call an air embolism that day. And when I came up out of the water to get back onto the boat, I began to notice that I was a little bit lethargic. I just felt really tired and clumsy. I couldn't reach back behind me to get my flipper off of my foot. So my dive buddy helped me do that. And I was able to climb onto the boat with a little assistance. But immediately when I got onto the boat, I became paralyzed from the chest down. And I don't really remember a lot of what happened from there till we got back to the land, which is about an hour and a half boat ride back to the land.
Wow.
But when we got back to the land, I remember there was an ambulance there, and they loaded me on the ambulance. They took me to the hospital, and they said, look, they began to try to explain to me what had happened to me. And they said, we're going to put you down in this, what was called a decompression chamber, hydrobaric chamber. And so they did that. I was down there for like 54 hours the first time, and they would put me on these oxygen breathing treatments. And they said after, a few trips down in there, I should be fine. Well, after that first 54 hours and then another 2 weeks worth of going down in there every single day for 5 hours a day, nothing changed. I mean, I was still paralyzed from the chest down. I couldn't really move anything. My diaphragm was partially paralyzed, so I couldn't hardly talk. My fingers were paralyzed. As far as any dexterity goes, I could move my hands, but I couldn't have any dexterity, with my fingers and everything. So they decided that the best thing for me to do was go back to Arkansas, where we were living at the time, and check into a rehab hospital there in Little Rock. So I did that. And you guys, that was when, Kent Humphrey came, and I believe that he began to sing for me while I was not able to be on the road. So that was in September of '88. So September, October, November, and December. So for almost 4 months, I was in the hospital. And at first, when we got to the rehab there in Little Rock, they thought that I thought everything was going to be okay. Within a few weeks, I'd be back on the road and it was all going to be good. But that wasn't the case. The doctors began to tell me they didn't know if I was going to be able to walk again, sing again, play again, for my wife and I to be able to have kids. I mean, everything really that I'd worked for up to that point in my life, I just felt like it all came crashing down. And I remember after being in the hospital probably about 2.5 to 3 months, I got mad. I got mad at God.
Yeah.
Up to that point, I was full of faith. He can do anything. But I got mad at him, and I began to tell him how I felt about him.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've done everything that I'm supposed to do as far as praying, as far as, the elders, as far as being anointed with oil. I mean, I'd been anointed from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet.
Yeah.
With multiple, felt like gallons of oil over those 3 months. But I remember, like, you're not doing a good job. You're not doing what you said you were going to do, what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I'm doing my job, but you're not doing yours. And I said, I was probably a lot more, I said a lot of things that I probably won't repeat as I was venting, to God about what I thought about him and what I thought about his character and his nature and what he was doing or wasn't doing. And so after I finished, it was late at night, and I was by myself. And after I finished, I just remember it being quiet. And I just remember, like, the Holy Spirit just, spoke to me. And people get freaked out when you say he spoke. It wasn't some audible voice, but
Right.
he just really let me know, spirit to spirit, that everything was going to be all right. And if I needed to walk again, or sing again or play again or have kids. If I needed to do any of that in order to fulfill his plan and purpose for my life, he would make sure I was able to do that. And nothing changed physically, but I just, all of a sudden I had a peace that everything was going to be okay, because my desire in life was to fulfill his purpose and plan for me.
Yeah.
So about another month after that, I got out of the hospital. And when I got out of the hospital, I was able to play the piano, and I was able to sing again. I was able to walk with forearm crutches, and so I went back on the road. I think it was New Year's Eve, maybe.
It was really quick. I mean,
Yeah,
for what they said that you could never do,
yeah,
I mean, you were doing it again.
yeah. So that New Year's Eve, I think, was my first concert back on the road. And less than a year from that, then we had our first son, Tyler, who's now 30 years old. So,
Wow.
so yeah, it was a really difficult time, but God was really, really faithful through that. And you know what? He did what he said. You know, in order for his purpose, obviously, was for me to have kids, was for me to go back on the road and sing and play and you know, be able to do those different things and walk. So yeah, he's amazing.
I mean, we don't understand when we're going through something like you were going through. You know, you start blaming, wondering where is God? You know, why did He healing me? You know, like you're talking about, but He always has a plan, and He knew exactly. It didn't catch Him by surprise. You know, He knew exactly what was going on, and so He still had a plan for you, obviously, because I think you continued on with the band for another, 6 years after that, something like that?
Yeah, till 94.
Yeah. And then in 94, you decided it was time to move on to something else. And
Yeah, so in
kind of left us high
94,
and dry there. We're right in the middle of recording a new project with a new record label. We just signed with Warner Brothers. And
however, I will say that I let y'all know I was leaving to where my picture wasn't on the album.
well, that's true. That's true.
And I still got to write half of the
You did. And
songs on the
you
project.
sang on
And
half of it too. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
played on most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
So,
did.
which I loved, by the way. That was one of my favorite projects.
Yeah, it is. It's great.
So yeah. So we had a couple of weeks worth of dates canceled. I don't know if you remember this. We were supposed to go up into Canada, and we had like 2 weeks worth of dates cancel. It was too late to rebook them, so I ended up being able to stay home. My son Tyler was 4 or 5 years old at the time, and I got to take him to t-ball practice. I got to go to church with Vanessa, and there was just something in me that said, you know, it's time, you know, for you to get off the road, and I've got a different assignment for you. And so I didn't know. I thought I knew what that assignment was, but I didn't necessarily, because I was going to get off the road, and I made the decision to get off the road, and I was going to write music, and I was going to produce and play on projects for people. That's what I was going to do. And about a month before I ended up getting off the road, month or two, Pastor Davis at Cornerstone Church in Nashville, the church that we were going to, he approached me and said, "Hey, I know you're getting off the road. Would you consider being our business administrator?" Well, I had no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
But he explained to me that it was taking care of the business and the operations of the church and all of the world, just the operational and business side. So I told him that I would. And so that kind of launched me off into something new. At that time, the church was a relatively small church, 300 or 400 members. And we were in a small building down that seated probably around 300 or 400 people.
Yeah.
And so I stayed there for 9 years. And over that 9-year period, the church grew from around 300 or 400 people up to around 2,500 people, and a budget of $5 million, 26 acres under campus, and about 250,000 square foot under roof. And so I was there through a huge time of growth, and it was awesome. It was fun. I loved what I did and loved being a part of that growth and seeing that growth happen. And but 9 years into it, there was another transition that happened for me. And there was a guy that went to the church, found out he had cancer, and he asked myself and Pastor Davis and another friend of ours, he said, "Hey, would you make sure that if something happens to me, would you come on my board and make sure that this organization does what it was set up to do, which is make money to fund missions?" So we told him that we would. Little did we know that 4 months later he would die of that cancer. So yeah, they asked me to come on and lead that organization through a transition. So I started leading them through a transition, and they ultimately asked me if I would take the position as CEO of that corporation. So it was a really large corporation. They were giving around $1 million a year to missions projects, and they were involved in annuities, commercial real estate, private placements, the equity and bond market, and so it was a time that really allowed me to develop my business skills and my understanding and knowledge of business to a greater degree than I ever had before, while being able to use that money to fund God's kingdom.
Yeah. So how long were you there? That was New Life Corporation, right?
Yeah. So I was at New Life International for right at 10 years.
10 years. Wow. Don't seem like it.
Yeah. 2003 to 2013.
Then you actually came back to Cornerstone, didn't you? For a little while?
I did. I came back there. They were going through some transition times, and Pastor Davis was really comfortable, with me because we had maintained a relationship, and I'd continue to go to church there. So he asked me if I would come back and kind of help solidify some things and help through some of the transitional issues that they were going through. So I did. I went and did that for not quite 2 years. And then my son, Tyler, had moved to Dallas. He had gotten married to our beautiful daughter-in-law, Summer, and they had let us know that they were going to have our first grandchild. So,
cool.
So we decided that, we heard it was a lot easier to hear the voice of God that we needed to move to Dallas once we found out that they were having our first grandchild. So we ended up moving to Dallas, and Tyler's father-in-law had a church there, and they were looking for an executive pastor. So they asked me to come on and be the executive pastor there. So I came on, and I told them I would do it for a year, and I ended up doing that for a couple of years as well, up until actually almost 3 years. I ended up being there at that church, but there was something in me that just had a desire to start my own business, a coaching and consulting business. When I was at New Life, I had people all the time come to me and who had issues in business.
Yeah.
And I would counsel them and consult with them and coach them on what they needed to do with their business to be successful, or to overcome obstacles that they had, or to even start a business. So I loved doing that.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I knew I eventually wanted to do. So I started doing that 2 years ago. So back in 2000 and really in 2017, I started McGee Inc. Coaching and Consulting. And in 2018, started really dove off into that and started doing that more on a full-time basis. And we also developed an organization called Reaching International. And Reaching International is a nonprofit side that does group coaching to help businesses and entrepreneurs who are faith-based to have what we call a kingdom business. So there are a lot of people who need coaching and consulting that want to do it, maybe that can't afford to do it through me personally, individually, but they can do it in a group setting, and they can make a donation to the nonprofit in order to do that. We have people that make donations to the nonprofit to actually sponsor people to go through our business roundtables and programs. So that's what I'm doing right now. I have groups that I run. Every month I go to Dallas, I go to Nashville, and also do some groups online. So I'm living in Georgia right now, which is a whole nother story. But yeah, I do those groups.
You must be close to the beach there. I see behind you. your window, your house. You're
I actually, yeah,
living on the beach.
I wish I was living on the beach. I actually live about an hour and a half from the beach, which is beautiful. We're in South Georgia.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I was living on the beach, that's what I'd want to look like, right
Oh
behind
yeah,
me.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're in Georgia now. And
Mhm.
how about, have you written any songs lately, or you working on some, or have you just totally kind of quit doing that, or what?
Well, I had quit doing that. Um, and I thought about it, I thought about it 3 or 4 times. And so Vanessa started saying, "Look, you have a gift of writing. You really need to write." And so I started thinking about it, and some song titles started coming to my head. And we were actually on a Zoom call the other night, and this lady, just out of the blue, she goes, "I don't know if anybody's ever told." She had no idea. She has no idea about my background. They were in
Yeah.
a small group with us. And she says, "I don't know if you've ever been involved in music or ever sang or ever written." She goes, "But I just feel like, that you'd be great at that." I just busted out laughing. I'm like, okay, you know, Vanessa's telling me, friends are telling me,
Yeah.
now I have some lady who has no idea about my background telling me. So,
Must
so
be
yeah,
God.
I have
Must be God.
definitely, yeah. So I've definitely started with some ideas as far as writing some songs. So I've
Good.
got 2 or 3 that are well on their way.
Well, I'm still singing a bunch of your songs today because they're great, and I'll
Thank
just
you.
keep on singing them as long as you'll let me.
Well, you know what? I need to write you some new ones, right?
That's true. I was thinking that the very same thing. You need to write me some new ones.
Yeah.
Robbie, I always ask everybody, you told a couple of road stories, but they were kind of serious. But can you think of one funny one that just kind of stands out that you could talk about? I mean, there are so many, but
Yeah. Road stories that stand out. Okay, so my favorite story that stands out for me was actually it involved you,
oh boy.
um, and so one of them was the fight at Shoney's,
Yeah.
where you got a bite taken out of
Oh,
your
yes.
your side.
Yes.
Uh, but the other one was when, actually, the one I was going to tell about was when you decided that you didn't have enough fuel to get to where we needed to go. So we were on Highway 60 in Missouri, and you decided you could turn the bus around on this 2-lane highway,
Yeah.
and you actually got the bus stuck in the middle of the road to where no one could pass going either direction.
Yes.
And so, the different things that ensued from that, I can't tell all of the stories.
Oh
Wouldn't be
man.
proper.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be proper online.
that.
The language that was used by the truckers, nor some of
Oh
the
man. They
outlying
called me every name in the
consequences from
book
that.
on the
Yeah.
CB. Yeah, that actually happened to me twice, and one was in Jeff and Sherry's old bus. We borrowed one of their buses. We had another engine problem or something, and we were in Bristol, Virginia, and I was driving, and I took the wrong road, and I was on a 2-lane road, and I thought, I got to turn this thing around. So I pulled in somebody's driveway and backed it up, and when I backed up in the road, I couldn't get it out of reverse. It was I think it was automatic. Maybe it wasn't. No, it probably wasn't, but I couldn't get it out of reverse, and I was stuck across the road again, blocking traffic. It's
So
terrible.
I guess if I'm telling one of myself, my funniest story. Well, I have 2. I'll tell on myself. So one of them was we were at Watermelon Park, and they had just started making CDs,
You're not
compact
going to tell this
discs.
one, are you?
Yeah, I am.
You are?
It's
Hey,
just,
man, this is a
well,
family show.
I know, right? So
Go
so we
ahead.
had just started our first project we had gotten on CD.
Yeah.
And so I was on stage, and we had finished our music, and I said, "Hey, we just got a brand new CD." And I said, "It's called One of a Kind." I said, "So if you guys would like to come back to the table and check out our compact discs," I said, "we would love to have y'all come by." Well, there was a Freudian slip when
Yeah.
I was saying,
Disc.
you know,
You said.
compact disc. And so I tried to correct it and I said it wrong again. And people out front were just, you know, just really started laughing and snickering. And then I'm still not really thinking right, obviously. This is something you would have normally done. But I finally looked at the crowd and I said, guys, I said, y'all are really making it hard. And they all just busted out laughing. And the promoter said, get him off the stage. So
Got the big cane out there and pulled you
I
off.
did, man. I got kicked off stage. It was totally innocent, but I got kicked off stage.
I think the Hip Hills were just about to go on right after us, and they were backstage. And when you said that, they couldn't hardly get their composure to go out there and sing after you said that.
Yeah. So one of my other memories that you guys talk about all the time is we were at a church, and I did a lot of the talking and MC work. So we were near the end of it, and so I began to talk to the people. And let me scoot back a little bit. So as I'm talking to the people, I put my hand up like this, and I'm leaving it over my head, right? And I'm just talking to people with my hand over my head. And what I tell them, I was talking to them about, you know, concerts and people being at concerts and chanting Natas, Natas, which is Satan spelled backwards, Satin, which I spelled Satan. So everybody begins to look at me weird and say, Satan, who's Satan?
We're all looking at each other going, Satan?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
man. You had a lot of bloopers back then.
Yeah.
Remember the time that the kid we took a break and the pastor's son got up there and played on this big old powder blue baby grand piano. You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And he got up there and he's like Anthony Berger, you know, he's all over the place.
He was good.
And we got back on stage and you started talking about what a great piano player he was. And you said, we have to use your imagination, what Robby may have said, but you said, I'm going to have to get that guy to sit down and show me we got the S and the H in the wrong place. Remember that?
I said, yeah, sit on this bench is what I said. That's what I tried to say.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. It was,
yeah.
And it's one of those things where I look back and, you know, everybody has, you know, things that I guess they call them Freudian slips that come out of their mouth. And I definitely had my share of them when I was on the road.
You definitely did.
Totally embarrassing.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on with me, and you're number 7, which is a perfect number, God's number, and I appreciate.
I'll make sure Vanessa knows that I was number 7, God's perfect number. She loves numbers.
She'll like that for sure. And thanks for coming on with me, man. Really appreciate it. Brings back a lot of good old memories. And,
yeah, cool deal. Well, thank you for doing this. I've enjoyed. I've watched so far. I watched all of yours. I watched some of Kent's. I haven't had a chance to watch the other ones yet, but pretty cool.
Well, I encourage you to watch them. Everybody watching this, go back and watch the other ones because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't even know, and I thought I knew guys. You know, when you sing with somebody, travel with somebody, you really don't know a lot about them. I mean, I know most of what you told today, but except for your childhood and stuff like that.
Sure.
But the other guys that were in other groups that we did concerts with, I mean, their background, I had no idea. So y'all need to go back and check those out.
All right. Well, thanks for doing this, Bobby.
You're welcome, man. And I hope to see you again soon.
Sounds good. We'll talk to you later.
You can take me out to eat.
I'll do it.
You're buying. I think I owe you one now.
I don't know. I don't mind buying.
Okay. I love you, man.
Love you too, bud.
Tell Vanessa I said hey.
All right, I will.
Bye-bye.
Bye.